Before I get talking about this, we were talking about food environments earlier, and I want to first of all say I'm a flexitarian, which means that I mostly eat vegan with the occasional a bit of fish once or twice a week, and meat in social situations. So I'm a social meat eater. And when I go to restaurants, because there's usually not tasty choices otherwise. But so I was really glad to hear Nick say that, because that's what we really need to encourage people to eat other than meat. So I'm Portuguese, from a Portuguese background, and grew up eating the Mediterranean diet with things like collard soup with a little bit of chorizo in it, sausage, fish, little bits of meat here and there. But my absolutely favorite dish is Portuguese boiled dinner, which is a whole bunch of meat. Every kind of meat you can think of every part of the animal, of every animal there is. And underneath it, you might not see it, there's vegetables like carrots, potatoes, cabbage, and collards. So there's some healthy stuff in it. It's very tasty. We used to eat it maybe once or twice a year because it's something that you have to have a lot of people eat at the same time. But after my talk today, you'll probably understand why I only eat it once every 3 or 5 years now. So I actually became involved with Health Canada in looking at Canada's food guide because, surprisingly, they were interested in this dietary study that we did looking at Ontario dietary patterns and the carbon footprint. And they are interested in actually incorporating environmental implications of what we eat into the Canada's food guide. So I work with a tool called life cycle assessment, and it's a way for us to understand the environmental impacts from farm to fork of food. And so starting from the food all the way to the transportation, processing, packaging, and transportation to retail, and all the way to when we cook it and eat it. I look at all the impacts, the materials and energy that goes into the food, and the emissions into air, water, and soil. And so they asked me, so can we include environmental life cycle assessment into our Canada's food guide? And they said, no, we don't have good data in Canada for that, but I'll tell you what you can do. And what we can do is look at what's been happening elsewhere in the world. So first thing I wanted to do is to teach them about how food production or consumption affects environment. So the first thing we need to understand is that 30% of the land that in the world is used to raise livestock, for keeping the livestock and also growing the food. And 10% of the land is used for all other food production, which is pretty incredible when you think about that. And the gray areas here are where we can't grow a lot of food because there's no growing season, it's desert, whatever else. So we actually don't have a lot of area where we can expand without getting into some ecosystems like rainforests and stuff like that. The yellow and orange signifies grazing land, and the green signifies cropland. So there's a lot of our earth is being used for growing food already. And if you look at global greenhouse gas emissions, 24% of the emissions that occur globally are due to agriculture and land use change when they convert things like forests into agricultural land. And I pointed out that if you just consider the livestock, 12 to 15% of that greenhouse gases are due to livestock alone. And these are cattle. We have about 1 billion head of cattle in the world, which isn't the ones we can count. There's probably more than that. And they're mostly raised for meat and milk. And so the livestock has almost the same emissions as transportation globally. So Leah was talking about bad news, some more bad news on a different front. And if you look at the whole food system, impacts from the farm to fork again, the food system is responsible for about 30% of total global environmental impacts. Not just greenhouse gases, but everything else. Now, where does the impact happen? It depends on what you're looking at. On the left-hand side here, I have looking at energy use. And you can see agricultural production uses about 20% of the energy use in the food system. But where we have the biggest impact in terms of energy use is household storage and preparation. Okay, so that's where the big hit is there. Transportation is only about 14%. It's a little bit different story when you look at greenhouse gas emissions. because 45% of the emissions occur during agricultural production. And this is because the emissions don't come from fossil fuels. They come from the soil and from the animals and from manure. So we talk about food miles, but you can see here in terms of the whole food system, the gray part there, it's only about 12% of the greenhouse gas emissions come from transportation. So if we really want to make an impact, we've got to change what we produce and what we eat. And does healthy food equal a healthy environment? Well, we've already started to talk a little bit about that. Somebody asked you today, what did you guys learn? You talked about, you're gonna say, we talked about pyramids, maybe Egypt or something like that. So there's the food pyramid here on the left, which is very commonly seen in the United States. This is the double pyramid, which was developed by the Barilla Center for Food and Nutrition in Italy. And it looks at what we should be eating. So we should be eating mostly from the bottom here, which are fruits and vegetables and grains and pulses. And we should be eating very little meat and sweets at the top. And if you look at the environmental impacts, it's like Mother Nature knows what it's doing, because the things that we should eat the most have the lowest impact. The things we should eat the least have high impact. And within animal protein, there's actually a bit of a range of what the impacts are. So this is from our study on farm to fork carbon footprint of animal products in Canada. And you can see that if you're to eat beef, you're going to produce 15 times more greenhouse gases than if you ate chicken. Okay? So that's a big impact. And sausage is also really high. So notice the sausage and beef, bad for the environment. And as already mentioned earlier, also sausage has been put by the World Health Organization, causing cancer, has already been mentioned. And red meats could probably cause cancer. And if you look at what's good for you and eliminates all those nasty things that's killing Canadians, as Leah put it, these are the things that help you prevent non-communicable diseases like cancer and cardiovascular health. So again, it's like Mother Nature knows what's good for us and for the earth. And just one more illustration here. So if you're to eat an omnivore diet, which means you eat almost pretty much everything, as opposed to a vegetarian diet, you're going to have about 4 times more carbon on average, because you're not just eating beef. And you're going to use 3.5 times more water and about 3 times more land. So it's a pretty big impact. And that's basically the message that I gave to to Health Canada when they were talking about how do we incorporate the environmental impacts into Canada's food guide that's coming out. Now, I specifically said that there were certain things I wanted to see from the new Canada's food guide. And I looked to the Harvard School of Public Health because they've developed a healthy eating plate that's based on the best available evidence and science. And it's going to be very similar to what you see in the back there. And it says you can eat lots of healthy oils. Half your plate should be vegetables, but you see how they divide that up, that it's mostly vegetables and less on the fruit side. It's about a quarter of your plate should be whole grains like whole wheat bread and brown rice, and a quarter of your plate should be healthy protein, which you should choose fish, poultry, beans, and nuts. Limit the red meats and cheeses because of the cancer-related effects to about, and then we're talking about limits, they actually say less than 2 times per week. So there's really real numbers there. In terms of milk or drinks, they say drink water, coffee, or tea with little or no sugar, and limit milk and dairy to 1 to 2 servings per day. This is much lower than Canada's food guide is right now, right? And the reason I kept talking about this one is because I've done the carbon footprint of Canada's food guide and the carbon footprint for the healthy eating plate. On the left-hand side is a carbon footprint per person per year based on 2,700 calories per day, which is high, but that's the number of calories we produce per day right now, globally. And it's an unbalanced diet, so it doesn't have enough fruits and vegetables, we don't produce enough fruits and vegetables, we don't produce enough protein, and we produce too much sugar, grains, and fats. Okay? So if we balance that out, according to Canada's food guide, which is the old one that I'm talking about here now, because we're talking about meat and alternatives being the main category, it doesn't say which meat to go for. So we mostly eat animal protein. That red bar is due to animal protein. That's how much of the diet affects. The other one is milk. It says to drink more servings than a healthy eating plate, and that grayish, big grayish area is the milk. Okay? And then when you look at the healthy plate, we can actually drop our footprint by following that instead. Now what about fish? This is the trickiest one. They wanted me to tell you, well, what can you tell me about fish? I said, fish is really messy. It's really hard to know what's sustainable. And they know that at least 2 servings of fatty fish per week will reduce death from heart disease by 33%. It's another one of those nice numbers that Ellen was talking about. This is one of those knowns. They also know there's other benefits, but they haven't quantified them quite as well. There are concerns because fish can also carry mercury and toxins. And in an environmental standpoint, 85% of our fisheries are overfished. So we are in a little bit of trouble when it comes to fish. So the fatty fish that they recommend we eat are salmon, mackerel, sardines, herring, and anchovies, sort of the Mediterranean diet. I grew up on the sardines, by the way. And according to Oceana, which is an NGO, they say if we want to eat sustainably, we should eat small fish, anchovies, herrings, and sardines. There we go, Mother Nature knows again. I don't know. Eat wild fish like Alaska salmon, but it should be MSC certified. And that's what I said, at least make sure that if you're going to eat fish and it's wild fish, that your Marine Stewardship Council certification symbol on it. The other ones are sustainable. I don't know how healthy they are. But again, there's some lining up between what's healthy for us and what's good for the earth. I'll tell you about this picture in a second. So in the end, basically what I told Health Canada, because they were saying, okay, we're trying to maximize nutritious plates and minimize environmental impact. And I said, well, this has nothing to do with what we eat, it's what we don't eat. So it would be really nice if you can include reducing food waste. And of course, it's also very important for us to increase the intake of plant-rich diets. Now, the reason I have solutions 3 and 4 here is because there's this great book which you might be able to find in your friendly neighborhood library. It might be on a long list of people wanting to see it. It's called Drawdown. And if you're interested to know what the best solutions are for reversing global warming, you get this book, you can go online as well. And out of 100 solutions, number 3 and 4, in the top solutions is to reduce food waste and increase plant-rich diets. So by doing this, we are being good to ourselves, we're being good to the earth, and we're also increasing food security because we have possibly 9 billion by 2050, and we don't have a lot more land left if we don't want to destroy the earth. So that's basically what I told Health Canada. Thank you.